Welcome to the Open Apple podcast, where we celebrate the Apple II. Whether you're a long-time user, a nostalgic visitor, or a newcomer to the community, join us as we share news and memories of Steve Wozniak's most famous personal computer.
Hello and welcome to Open Apple. This is episode 54 for December 2015. This is your co-host, the first, Quinn. With me as always is co-host, the second, Mike McGinnis. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing well, Quinn, and you?
I am fantastic. So we are here with our annual Open Apple tradition, which is our year-end roundtable discussion, where we bring in a few luminaries of the community, and we just kind of talk about some stuff. So shall we get started? I can introduce our cast if you're ready to go.
Sure, why not?
All right. So with us, I'm going to be moderating this roundtable, and with us is, of course, co-host Mike, who you all know.
Woo!
And we have distinguished Beagle brother, Randy Brandt. Say hello, Randy.
Hello, Randy.
And with us also is distinguished model maker and RetroConnector maker of RetroConnector things, the proprietor of Option 8, Charles Mangin. How you doing, Charles?
I'm doing all right. I'm just going to pause you right here because I think you need to look up the word distinguished and also the word luminary.
Note to self. All right. And along with those two distinguished gentlemen, we've got Carrington. How you doing, Carrington?
I'm extinguished.
We just can't get rid of you.
Yeah.
You didn't spray for Carrington.
We didn't spray for Carrington, and now he's back.
Oh boy.
All right, gentlemen. Let's get this party started, shall we? So I wanted to start with an email that I got, that we got from a listener, and it's kind of a fun topic. Something we don't actually talk enough about on the show, weirdly, is how to kind of get started with Apple II stuff. And it's actually a question that we get a lot. So, I think when we're doing the show, we get kind of inside baseball with the news, and we forget that, there might be people listening who just are kind of interested in getting back into this stuff. So the question I'm going to start with is from listener Victor, who asks, if I were to get an Apple II set up solely for playing the best games, what should I get? Let's start with Charles. What do you think?
I suppose that depends on what your definition of the best games are. I've really been trying to stick with my Apple IIe for my various hardware experiments because it's fairly wide open, and there's nothing in it that's too expensive or difficult to replace. But if I were using it for gaming, I would open up one of the GSes that I have in reserve and do more of the arcade style, the ability to do some of the 16-bit games. Especially with the expanded memory and better sound and just support for backward compatibility with the 8-bit stuff as well. I think you get a fairly stock GS with a memory expansion and maybe like a CFFA or something solid state for storage, and then go from there.
Cool. Yeah, it's a good thought, going straight to the 16-bit. What about you, Randy? What do you think?
Well, I'm a huge 2GS fan, but I'd be a little old school here, and I'd say go back to some of the 2+ games to really get some of the origins. Like, I liked Microwave, if anyone remembers that one, and that was a fun one. And Sabotage, and it was an early Pac-Man, I think, that ran on the 2+, if I recall correctly.
Gobbler.
Yeah. So and then of course, the Beagle thing. I've got to recommend some of the creative tech stuff that Bert did. Some of I think it was on Beagle Bag. He had a bunch that were actually moving text characters around to animate, which is kind of a creative way to overcome some of those early limitations, especially when he didn't know how to program an assembly language. So writing a game in BASIC that moves text around, and yet still some fun playable games. So explore some of those early roots.
Cool. All right, going all the way the other way. Carrington, how about you?
I disagree with everyone. What a shocker. So I'm going to recommend to start with a book. The new Apple II User's Guide, which is David Finnegan's book. And I think if you want to get into the Apple II and you don't have a history with it, this is a fantastic introduction. It's something like 700 or 800 pages, and it covers the different models and peripherals and how to hook them up and how to get on the internet with it and what are the basic things you need to get started. So if you're coming completely fresh, that's what I would recommend you start with, and that'll help you choose a model. But when you do choose the model, ignore all the earlier advice and go for an Apple IIe. I think it is the one that you can pick up the cheapest off eBay, so you're not going to have a huge investment. Most likely, it's going to run every game that you want to run, other than the 2GS, but the 2GS isn't a real Apple II anyway, so who cares? And any peripherals or anything you add to that will work with most other Apple II models, except the 2C. So if you decide you really like it, but what you really want long term is to invest in a more collectible, like older Apple II or something, then the drives and the monitor you've picked up will all still work with that, and it would only be just the relatively cheap 2E that you'd be recycling back onto eBay or so. So I think that's the way to keep your investment low. Or the alternative would be start with an emulator. Virtual 2 is amazing, and if you just want to dip your toe in Apple II games, then this is the least resistance way to do it. Virtual 2 is phenomenal and the best emulator I've ever used for anything. And then you can simply get disk images, run them on your Mac if you have one, and if not, then Virtual 2 is not going to help you. And then just sort of try out the games and get hooked. And once you get hooked, then you'll be ready to invest. So that would be my advice.
All right, Mike, how about you?
Well, Carrington stole my answer, so I quit.
That was also my answer.
I think the emulator is a great solution because you can get Virtual 2 on your Mac for a few bucks, or if you're working on Windows, Apple Win is totally free, and it's also a great 8-bit Apple emulator. It's ready whenever you want to play a game. You can blow it up full screen. You can define your keys to whatever you want, so you don't have to figure out the IIGSes stuff on some games. I think with one of Charles's RetroConnectors, actually, you can plug in your old school joystick and play on your modern machine through an emulator. Am I right about that, Charles?
That is correct, and everyone playing along at home, drink.
Don't have to tell me twice.
And you don't have to invest in hardware or try to fix your Apple II if you buy it on eBay and it shows up broken.
Apple IIs don't break.
That's actually a good reason. So I was going to play devil's advocate a little bit and say with Virtual 2 that I think the trick there is you really want a joystick for a lot of Apple II games, and but yeah, that's a great opportunity for Charles. Why don't you plug your products a little bit there? Tell us about what your connectivity options that you've got for joysticks and emulation.
For emulators, you've got the Joystick Shield, I call it. It's kind of a throwback to when I was working on it as an Arduino Shield, but it's a teensy Arduino clone with a circuit board basically piggybacked on the back that lets you plug in any fairly generic USB gamepad controller or joystick, and it becomes a no, I'm going backwards, aren't I? Sorry, got too many things. So backing up, it lets you plug in any Apple II compatible joystick or paddles, and it becomes a generic USB controller for a Mac or a PC. And it works pretty well with most games. The Virtual 2 emulator tries to do a little bit too much on the configuration side to make your joystick act more like an Apple II joystick, and so there's some built-in configuration stuff in the hardware on mine, and I keep trying to get in touch with the author of Virtual 2 to see if we can work together on that issue. But for the most part, it works really well. It works really great in Apple Win and on the Internet Archive and their archive of Apple II and other platforms as a great way to just plug in any old Apple II joystick, presuming that the potentiometers still work, and play just right in a web browser, play Choplifter or whatever in your web browser.
Oh, that's cool. Actually, I didn't realize it worked in those in-browser emulators. So that's probably the lowest possible barrier to entry there. Well, that's awesome. Thanks for your answers, everybody. The only thing I guess I'll throw in there is if someone wants to play on real hardware, and if they're solely focused on games, unlike a lot of us who want to play with GeOS and Apple III driver disks for some reason. The other thing I would suggest is something like an Apple IIe and the Apple II game server, which, if all you want to do is get games onto the machine and play them, and as many of them as possible, as quickly as possible, the Apple II game server lets you just plug in your audio jack straight to your iPod or your iPad, anything that can browse the web, and there's a site you can go to, and we'll link to that in the show notes, and it just downloads games into memory straight through the audio port, and you can just play them. So that's a pretty cool way to get started on real hardware as well. Zero barrier to entry there. All right, so moving right along, kind of sticking with our theme here, we've got a question from, let's call him listener Patrick. He's not yet a listener to the show, but he will be. He's a friend of mine who has recently acquired an Apple II Plus, and he has the dilemma that he has no floppy disks. He got the machine from somewhere, I don't exactly know where, but it came with no disks at all. And he has never done anything with retro computing. He's completely in the dark here, has no idea how to make it do anything at all. Where should he start? Mike, let's start with you.
If you've got nothing at all, I think it's a little bit process intensive. But the instructions are pretty clear. You can use ADT Pro actually to send a boot floppy basically from your modern machine using audio cables over to your Apple II, and then if you have does he have a disk drive? I assume.
Yeah, let's assume for sake of argument he's got monitor, computer, and let's say a 5 1/4 inch disk drive.
Okay, so either hit up one of your friends like Quinn and have her send you a blank disc, or you can buy one for a couple of bucks on eBay. And ADT Pro will then write itself onto that floppy, and then you can boot again from that floppy and use it to transfer other software over. That generally you'll either have to then have other floppies, or you'll need something like the CFFA, and you can load up your SD card that way and boot directly to the CFFA, and you're off and running.
Cool. All right. That sounds like a good place to start. How about Carrington? Anything to add to that?
I would say one idea would be, if you want to invest a little bit of money, go to a2heaven.com and pick up the SD Floppy 2 from Plemen over in Bulgaria. It's awesome. I love it so much. And then that plugs into your Apple II just as if it was a disk drive. So now you have 2 disk drives, except one's a little tiny thing that takes an SD card, but you can very easily download SD images, disk images, throw them on the SD card and boot right into those, and then copy back and forth. So that gets you software really quickly, but you have to wait for mail from Bulgaria and is a little expensive. Another way to go would be to spend even more money and go to Kansas Fest, because they will hook you up with all the discs you could ever possibly want and help and set you up, and it'll be awesome. And you will make friends with us, and we will eat in the cafeteria, and it will be fun. So that's my real solution.
One caveat there, my friend Patrick is super annoying, so you may not want him at Kansas Fest.
Now I really want him at Kansas Fest.
Yeah,
Join me, Patrick.
I kid. Yeah.
Now, is that super annoying on the scale of people that already go to Kansas Fest, or is that just super annoying in general population terms? Because those are different scales altogether.
Right, yeah. Let's see, on a scale from like Mike to Carrington, I'd say he's about a 4.
So a Kevin Savitz then.
Yeah, exactly. He's a solid Kevin and a half. Yeah. All right. This scale is nonsensical. All right. How about you, Randy? What are your thoughts on this topic?
Oh, there's not a whole lot else to add, except that I do love my CFFA card. So, I mean, while we're throwing options out there, that's certainly a great one.
Let's spend his money.
I know that there was a recent new run of those cards. Are they still available, or are those sold out completely? Does anyone know?
Yeah, last I heard there was still 100 left in the run. That was a couple of weeks ago as of this recording, but I'm not sure.
Well, you can't go wrong with a CFFA card, and I was not paid to make that announcement.
It is
and
true.
It works in the 2 Plus, is that true?
It works everywhere.
Does anyone know? Even the Apple III.
That's not true. The CFFA is
my Apple IIc.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, it's definitely if you've got slots, it's definitely the gold standard for compact or
if you've
flash
got
memory
the
storage.
slots.
If you've got the slots, baby.
I use them in
Got
my
the flash.
PC, my Mac. I use them in my car. I mean, you can use them everywhere. It's the ultimate card.
And I will say you can even use one on a Laser 128 because it has an external slot, which is so you can stick it, have it hanging off the side of your laser if you like. I used to have a RAM factor card sticking out the side of my laser, just sort of hanging there. You had to be really careful not to like put your hand on it, break it off. It was kind
How
of funny.
about the Bosses? Does anyone have one of those yet? Remember those? German clone.
The which?
Bosses?
No.
It was back early 80s.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, it was a cool clone. I think it ran I was going to say Windows didn't what was the CP/M. It ran CP/M and Apple II software and had a really cool keyboard with a numeric keypad on it, the whole bit. It was a nice machine, but they kind of vanished quickly.
That does actually raise an interesting question. I wonder how many, we've talked on the show about how many crazy zillions of Apple II Plus compatibles there were made, especially like in Eastern Europe and stuff. In Russia, there was whole warehouses full of strange brands that we've never heard of. I wonder how many of them would support CFFA. Guess we'll never know. All right. Last but not least, Charles, any thoughts on how to get this guy Patrick's machine going with no floppy disks whatsoever?
I would say just ADT Pro is the sort of gold standard as far as bare metal booting. If he has a floppy drive, you can order floppy disks, blank ones from a variety of places, and download a handful of games or a handful of utility applications from Asimov or wherever, and put them onto disks, and then that is again assuming he has a working drive, and boot them from there and have a pretty standard setup and be able to play pretty much right away. As far as the solid state stuff goes, I second I guess it was Carrington that proposed the Plowman.
Oh, the SD floppy 2?
Yeah, SD floppy 2, yeah.
Love
not
that
only
thing.
I cannot remember it, but I can't remember the name of it, but I've kind of lost track of how many I bought from him. I've bought 3 or 4, and I've given at least 1 or 2 to people for, either in trade for something at Kansas Fest, or someone that needed something like this setup, said, I don't have any discs, I don't have any way to get stuff onto it, or I want to try out this thing, but I don't have it. So, you can have one of mine. I have a couple of spares. Yeah, they're awesome. It's plug in, and it's recognized as a disc 2, and if you pry open the case of your 2C, or if you get the right adapter, it'll go into a 2C as well, so it gives you the dual floppy there. Yeah, the only other thing that I would say is get a good solid joystick or a good set of paddles, and clean the potentiometers on them and clean the buttons up, and you'll be able to play all the games that you remember or don't remember, depending on what your computer of choice was back in the day. But sticking strictly to keyboard stuff, it kind of limits you to the kinds of action games you can play, and you get that real feeling of nostalgia when you've got the good clicky buttons in your hand and whisking the joystick back and forth and try and get the little guy across the screen. And now I'm getting all excited to go play some more games again. But anyhow, how long is this podcast scheduled to go?
Yeah,
all night.
Too long, according to roughly half our listeners. Yeah, I'm glad you guys brought up the solid state, because that really is, I think, a lower barrier to entry, honestly, than floppy disks. For my 2C, I've been doing just all solid state stuff, and it's just so much easier, especially if you've got a MacBook. It's got the SD card slot right in it, so you just fire your SD card into your Mac, drag a bunch of disk images off, and have Asimov directly onto the SD, and you stick it in your SD floppy 2, and you're playing games. So that's pretty low barrier to entry there. The only thing I would add is, if you want to not mess around with ADT Pro and learning how all that stuff works, and you're willing to spend some money, you can also just buy people's disc collections off of eBay. People often put up huge lots of, hundreds or even thousands of discs, probably mostly pirated games or whatever, but you can just buy those quite often as well. So that's one more option. So let's see. You guys have talked a lot about A2 Heaven, and that segues nicely into my next question, which is, his much anticipated web store is finally online. And so my question for the esteemed panel is, which of his products are you most excited about? So I'm just going to kind of run through the list here real quick for anyone who isn't familiar. So right now he's offering the Apple II SAM card, which is something to do with, I assume, that speech synthesis software. He's got the Mockingbird clone. He's got the declock to go inside your 2C. He's got the 2C to VGA adapter. He's got the RamWorks 3 VGA extender. If you've got a RamWorks 3, it adds VGA to it. He's got the Trackstar 2, which shows you your track reouts on your disk drives. And he's got his RamWorks 3 clone. And I think he's got some more stuff upcoming. There's been rumors of a VGA card and some other things for the 2E. So let's go back the other way. Let's start with Charles. Which, if any of those, are you interested in?
I don't know. I really don't have much in the way of desire for many of these things because I don't think I had the originals that they are clones of. The RamWorks is good because it's obviously a new hardware for adding RAM expansion. Now, he's not the one that has soaked up the supply of the 19-pin connectors because I might just try and buy some from him.
Yeah, that's the big mess of wires guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for his
I think the VGA adapter, honestly, because the monitors, obviously the monitors are dying off more quickly than anything else, and that's really the thing that keeps me from using some of the machines that I have is I don't have a compatible monitor, or the monitor that I do have that's compatible is in such poor shape or just so big and power hungry that I'd love to be able to plug it into a standard VGA dirt cheap LCD that I can get off of the side of the road.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, that's a very exciting product. I actually have one of these myself, the Apple IIc VGA. As soon as it was announced, I jumped in and ordered one, and I received it last week, and it's pretty fantastic. So I'm sure we'll be talking lots more about that on the show. Let's see. Let's go to Randy. Any of these that that are on your holiday list?
Well, not really, but if I was going to pick one, I'd actually have to second that, and the 2C VGA one would be the one that would interest me the most. So, sorry to not be more creative and original, but hey, I got to be honest, that's the one I'd be most interested in.
All right. Well, in favor of honest for creative and original, how about Carrington? What have you got for us?
Oh, I thought you were just doing the esteemed part of the panel. I already picked up.
Yeah, I ran out of them, so
I picked up the 2C VGA adapter as well. Not right away. It sold out before I could get one. I believe, Quinn, you mocked me on Twitter for that. But then they became available again, so I bought one then. And that was what I was most excited about. I am now most excited about picking up. I think I'm going to pick up the RamWorks 3 and the VGA extender for it. Because then it gives me a VGA option for the Apple II. If you want something with slots and you want VGA, there's not a lot of options for that. So that's sort of what I'm most excited for to pick up. That said, I don't know if I'm going to use any of these things. I picked up the 2C VGA one so I can have it because, like everyone else, I worry about these monitors going away. But I have a problem with using modern monitors because if I'm going to do that, then I may as well just use an emulator because the screen and what I'm looking at is so much part of the real hardware experience. But those monitors are going away, so I'm sort of stocking up on VGA options for the disappointing future when these things don't work anymore. So I'm not really excited about it so much as I'm resigned to it. And I think the RamWorks plus the RamWorks VGA combo looks like a good one. So I'll probably pick those up next.
Yeah, the future is indeed disappointing. I think there's definitely some of that for me too, that a lot of the stuff I buy, not necessarily because I want to use it, but because I'm pretty sure I may want it someday. And this stuff goes away. People run out of free time, they change jobs, they get out of the hobby, whatever, the people making this stuff, and then it never is available ever again. So I think I've been burnt a couple times with small hobbyists producing this stuff, not getting it when I could. So I think I'm pretty interested in the declock actually for the 2C. That's a pretty cool thing.
The 2C VGA adapter will also be handy. I think a lot of people will be using that at Kansas Fest because most of us want to bring a 2C and then a little tiny monitor, and it'll open up a lot of monitor options for travel with this adapter, I think.
Yeah, and the other thing, Flack has talked about this, Rob O'Hara on his podcasts, that he likes this stuff because he's got, a dozen retro computers in the room, and if you have to have all the monitors, they take up huge amounts of space. So if you can have one, modern monitor that you connect everything to, then that saves a lot of space in your retro computing layer. All right. Well, Mike, I haven't forgotten about you. What do you think? Are you super excited about any of these A2 Heaven products?
Actually, I'm going to go a different way here and say the one that interests me most is the Trackstar 2. So this is actually a clone of a device that was made back in the 80s. And all it did was show you, it would give you a red LED readout of the track that your disk drive head was reading or writing at that particular moment. It was recommended a lot in Computist magazine because it helped you find out where the protection routines were running on the diskette and where it actually is, as opposed to where the protection was trying to fool you into thinking it was, and that sort of thing. But it was a very Zen-like experience after a while, just watching the numbers flip back and forth across the tracks. And I haven't had one of these in a long time, and so I've really missed that. And I'm looking forward to watching the little red numbers.
Does anyone
Ooh,
does
pretty.
anyone know what do those devices have a specific purpose that they're built for? Like, is it useful for cracking software, or is there something that they're originally designed to do?
I think it was mostly to help people crack software, so you could see where routines were loading from and where information was being stored and recalled.
Okay. For all that cracking I do, that's going to be handy. All right.
about you, Quinn?
Let's see. So, I guess, I think the next one in line is, like I say, I've already got the 2C VGA. And the next one in line is probably the declock for me as well.
Okay. Yeah, you're one of those 2C weirdos.
Yeah, I do like my it's just so pretty.
Do you have the SD floppy too for your 2C?
I do not actually.
Oh,
now that you
so
mention
good.
it, yeah, I'm actually in the market for a new flash storage solution. I've been using my Unisdisk, which I quite like, and I'm actually going to experiment with. You can upgrade the old one to the new Unisdisk Air, and I'm going to experiment with that, so you can actually load, disk images over Wi-Fi. And I'm considering experimenting with just installing it right inside the 2C. But I've been having some trouble with my Unisdisk. The latest firmware version, it doesn't seem to work with SmartPort, so I have to go back a couple of firmware versions to use SmartPort, but then the newer firmware version is required for some other features, so I'm kind of in this weird middle zone. I'm having to switch my firmware back and forth all the time with it, which is not exactly convenient. So I was actually considering, this might be blasphemous, considering what Charles just said about Big Mess of Wires buying up all the precious remaining floppy disk connectors, but I'm considering buying the floppy emu, which seems to be quite a nice full-featured thing. Does anybody have one of those?
I do. I've got it hooked up to a Mac, and it works remarkably well as a floppy replacement for classic Macs.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, it's surprisingly, he kind of came out of nowhere with that thing. I mean, he added Apple II support to it, and added Disk 2 and SmartPort support for it right out of the box. So that was pretty cool.
And
Previously,
2GS and Lisa and
yeah,
the two coconuts with a string between.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like pretty much anything that uses that connector, he supports now, which is pretty great, considering he has the remaining world supply of those connectors. That's pretty handy. There's more than a few of us that are bitter about that. All right, so let's see. The next thing I'm curious about is the Ethernet 2 is some pretty big news that happened recently, and I'm curious if any of you have it and or are excited by it or planning to use it. I'm just going to throw that one out to the panel.
I won one.
You won one?
Yeah,
How did
at
you win
Kansas
one?
Fest. That was
Did
my
you?
prize. Yeah.
Oh. Have
Go
you used
me.
it?
Nope. But I really like it. It looks awesome, and I'm sure I will use it.
Wow, that was super lame. Anybody else?
I actually have 3.
3, wow.
2 of which don't work.
Really?
and one that's actually an official working released one. I'm working with the creator of the Ethernet, whose name escapes me, and I apologize to him.
Glenn Jones.
Glenn, thank you.
Yeah.
I'd forget my own name if it weren't tattooed somewhere on me. I'm working with Glenn on doing a light pipe extension for it, so you can see the blinky lights out the back of your case instead of having to have the case opened up to read the lights on it. And so he sent me a couple of sample boards that failed tests, so I could use them for fitting and measuring and whatnot. And I have used it to the extent that I can make it work and blink and try and connect over the network, but the version of ADT Pro that is required for it is not the officially next version of ADT Pro. And I know David Schmidt is working on an official support for the new Ethernet 2 because it has its own built-in IP stack and it's very different from the original. And so I can't get the software, the sort of unofficial version, to work, so I'm just putting it on the back burner until David comes out with official support for, I think it's like version 2.0.2 is going to support the Ethernet 2 of ADT Pro. And then from there, that's going to be how I get disk images onto actual floppies and do that, because serial cards are just so passé now.
Should be fast, I would think, faster than serial.
I think once you get to the top end of serial, it's about as fast as it's going to get on the Apple II side. It does allow me to hook it up to any machine on my network, as opposed to the one machine that I have that actually has a driver for the USB to serial adapter and an old enough version of OS X that still has the driver for that USB to serial adapter. Whereas if I can do it over my network, I can send ADT Pro stuff from my laptop, which is wireless, but still on the same network as the wired router, and not have to worry about having adapters plug into adapters and old drivers and things that when I reboot, the driver goes away and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Ethernet feels like a more stable way to connect to retro computers rather than serial ports. Because, serial ports, they keep getting harder and harder to keep working. Yeah, you need more and more obscure adapters and, like you said, the drivers and so on. So that connection is getting very tenuous. So, if we can switch to Ethernet, that feels like it's gonna be around for a little longer. Well, that's funny. That makes 3 of us then that have Ethernet 2s we're not using, because I also have one. I actually did a board exchange with Glenn. If any of you follow my blog, I recently built a ROM dumping tool for the Apple II, and to rip my 2C Plus ROMs, and I was thinking about doing a run of them if anyone wanted one, and he was interested, so I gave him an official number 2 board that I built in exchange for an Ethernet 2. So I was very excited to do that. It's a very cool card, but I only have an Apple IIc at the moment, so I don't have anything to put it in. But I will have something else soon, and I'm sure. And again, under the heading of get it while you can, before the people that make them stop making them. And then you'll never be able to get it again, and you'll be sad. All right, so I got one more. Well, anyone else want to pipe in on that topic? Randy, Mike?
I have no Ethernet cards that I'm not using.
Okay.
Well put.
Noted. Okay. So I'll update my records. All right. So let's talk about the future a little bit. Are there any upcoming Apple II products, events, or things that you folks are looking forward to? I'm going to throw that one out to the panel again.
Definitely Kansas Fest, but that's an easy one.
I'm trying to get Antoine to come from Brutal Deluxe.
That'd be great.
Oh yeah,
That'd be a
awesome.
lot of fun.
We'll see. He's got lots going on. He's got three boys that are elementary to early high school age, so they've got their sports and things that keep them busy. But they would like to visit the States, and he may be able to work that into a family trip and come. That's what we're hoping anyway. We had a great time with them in Paris and spent some of it trying to convince him to come to Kansas Fest. And I told him if he comes this year, then I will too.
So you have to tell us that story. What were you doing in Paris hanging out with Antoine?
Well, I was in Paris hanging out with Antoine. What else? No,
as one
yes,
does.
as one does. And one
Sure.
didn't you see my picture with Olivier at the Eiffel Tower? It was in the I posted it in the group. you can find it on the Apple II group on Facebook. But anyway, no, we did a trip to Europe. I did kind of a little Band of Brothers tour, hitting some of the D-Day beaches, and then of course you got to go to Paris if you're going to go to Normandy, and if you go to Paris, you got to hang out with the Brutal Deluxe guys. So we had a great time. Had a little barbecue in his backyard. Spent the night at his place, and hung out with Olivier and him the next day. So we had a very brutal yet deluxe day in Paris.
Did you guys talk
What a
shop
bump.
and set up a Beagle Deluxe sort of collective there?
Well, we didn't set up a collective, but he did prepare a wonderful barbecue, but in order to partake, I had to sign some old products for him. So we had a great time. He's got a wonderful wife and kids, and we really enjoyed our time with the Vigneault family.
Is there going to be a Beagle Brothers themed scene demo forthcoming?
Can only hope. The big news is that Olivier just had his wife apparently had twins here a month or so ago. So kind of an exciting, more little Brutal Deluxers, the next generation.
Brand new Apple II fans. Well, congratulations, Olivier.
Speaking of Brutal and Deluxe.
I think that's what he named them, but his wife may have overruled that.
Oh, please let that be true.
I'm trying to get all three Oliviers in the same place at the same time because I think they're all really actually just one person.
I know I get them mixed up all the time too. I probably did it on this podcast or another podcast and offended one or more Francophiles.
I think we've done it almost every episode. Antoine has to write in and tell us, nope, that's the wrong Olivier.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we've referred to various Oliviers many times, and we have gotten them wrong every single time. So we're batting zero on our French Oliviers.
Well, the one I know is the tall one, I think. I think he's the tallest one of them.
We also have a nasty habit of attributing things to Antoine that he didn't do. So he's always very gracious to correct us on that.
Well, he is
Nope,
the French
not me
Apple II
again.
guy.
The one.
Definitely the most active one on Facebook.
So let's see. How about you, Carrington? What are you looking forward to this coming year in the Apple II world?
Oh, it's all Kansas Fest all the time. I'm just, all I do is spend 11 and a half months waiting for that and then really enjoy it and then go back to waiting for that again. No, mostly the reality is it's weird because I don't know what I'm looking forward to, but I know it's going to be awesome. And here's what I mean by that. It seems we're on an accelerating pace where every year I am surprised and delighted by both the software and particularly the hardware that comes out. We're living in this crazy Apple II golden age. So I have no idea what's going to come out. I don't even understand how the things that have come out already have done so. If I could go back in time 10 years and say, well, here are all the things that'll be lying around for you to purchase, and you won't even necessarily buy them all because there's so many awesome things out there, I would be shocked, I would say. And I'd also wonder how I came back here. It's like, oh my goodness. So I'm positive there's going to be amazing new things in both the soft and the hardwares. And so I'm excited about that. It's just, it's kind of like Christmas. I know amazing things are coming. I just don't know what's going to be under the tree, but I bet I'm going to love it.
All right. That's nice undirected optimism. Expect no less from Carrington.
It is my skill.
So let's get a little more specific and give Charles another chance to plug anything upcoming from RetroConnector that you want to talk about, Charles.
Now that it's December, I've finally announced or released just about everything that I talked about or pre-announced or made promise of at Kansas Fest this year. So it's going to be all new stuff for 2016, all new all the time.
See, told you.
I do have a few things on the drawing board, and I've got some fun little hacks that I'm one-off kind of things. But the thing that I'm actually excited about, to stop talking about myself for 1 or 2 minutes, is the Bard's Tale Remastered and some of the other things that Rebecca Heineman has been working on, essentially as a result of being contacted by the Apple II community and sort of being reinvigorated with the hardware that she was used to developing on, but also getting hold of the source code and the rights from so many publishers and other developers that she can now basically spend the rest of her productive life, I suppose, working on new things for the 8-bits and reinvigorating old ideas like Bard's Tale and any number of other things. I wouldn't mind seeing a 4K surround 5.1 channel Task Times in Tone Town with immersive VR and the 360 degree sound. But just the idea that the community that we're in, as small and seemingly insular as it is, can reach out to someone like that and they have no idea that, oh, hey, Kansas Fest is still happening and people are still excited about this stuff that I used to do, and they actually know my name. So yeah, we were all, I think, except for, well, I'd say we were all there, but not all of us were there, Mike, at Kansas Fest when she did her keynote and was talking about all these things and announcing the stuff that she was working on and that she had basically stumbled back into. So
when she dropped the mic and said, "Oh, and here's Space Ace compiled for the 2GS from source," I'm like, "And Becky rocks."
Absolutely. So that kind of stuff. It's just it's amazing to me the kinds of things that are coming back around, either as a retro and nostalgia kind of cyclical thing, or the originator, the developer of these titles that we all know and love is actually still out there and still in the software development game. Hasn't moved on to farming catfish or something like that.
Yeah, that's actually a great angle. I hope we see more of that, in the near future. That might be something I'm looking forward to, is maybe seeing some of the other greats getting back into it. We've certainly seen some of that, of course, with Randy here and Rebecca, and it'd be awesome to see. We just spoke to David Schroeder last month. He's back in the scene, kind of retro scene with Dino Eggs Rebirth, and it'd be great to see. I don't know if we can convince Bill Budge to get his hands dirty with 8-bits again, but this kind of stuff is great to see. I think it's contagious. This retro kind of enthusiasm, and I think as the community grows, we kind of draw more and more of the veterans back in. Hopefully, Mike, anything to add to that?
Well, I'm looking forward to it continuing to evangelize the Apple III and reminding everyone that it's a much better platform than the Apple II. Just have to pick it up.
Wait, hold on one sec there, Mike. I gotta drop my mic. There we go. Okay, my mic quit working there.
Quinn, can you ban him? Do you have?
Hey. Interestingly, I've been with the frustration that built up in me over my computer's inability to play Fallout 4. Largely because I haven't invested in hardware powerful enough to play it. I've gone running back to Wasteland, the original on Apple II, and really, really enjoying the experience and being really surprised at how well it's held up. Some of these games, like, you have great memories of them, and then you boot them back up again. You're like, oh my God, why did I like this? And Wasteland wonderfully has not been that experience. And I've also
Wasteland completely holds up. It's amazing.
And I've also been playing another one which is a little bit more obscure, I think, than Wasteland, but it's also by Electronic Arts, or maybe it was Origin, 2400 AD, which is sort of a science fiction-y type Wasteland game.
Oh, I love that game. Mm-hmm.
And I've really been having a great time rediscovering some of the old joys of my youth.
Are you playing those on your Bob Bishop's Apple II you just got on eBay for $17,000?
$17,800.
Oh, well, yeah. For you, that's like you round.
Pocket change. I got that in my wallet right now.
Did that sell or is that auction still running?
Nope, that ended a day or two ago for $17,877.
Wow.
Was that a record for an Apple II?
Actually,
like a regular
no.
Apple II?
No, there were a couple of Rev Zeros that sold a year or two back. One sold for like $25,000, and one sold, and the next one a week later went for $24,999.
Oh, so this was a bargain.
Indeed.
Couldn't afford not to buy this one.
Well, and what's kind of surprising about
apparently
this,
I could afford not to buy it.
I mean, it is number 13, so that's certainly saying something, and it was Bob Bishop, so there's some provenance there. But it's interesting because the plastic shell has been replaced. This is his original one was one of the ventless cases, and I guess it
I wondered about that.
It got melty on him, and so he had it replaced.
Melty.
I noticed in the pictures it had the vent holes, and I was pretty sure his didn't for being early serial number. So I wondered what the story was there.
Yep. Although in his case, he didn't go on eBay, buy one, and replace it. He actually had Apple replace it for him.
As one does.
Yes. What were you going to say, Carrington?
Oh, I just like how it's Bob Bishop and you go, it's got a bit of providence there. Just, that guy did, I think, one or two things.
He might have done some like mildly interesting graphic stuff way back when. I don't know.
Maybe the first, not just the first. I think the first 4 graphics games. Right. Not good enough to be the first. Make the first one. Make the next 3 as well.
And better yet, he would start at 6 o'clock in the evening and have the game done in the morning.
Yeah. Well, that's how you get the first 4 done. You got to beat everyone to the punch. What I found neat about the auction was actually the letter that came with it. His employment offer for Apple.
Oh yeah, that was very interesting.
That was neat. And show of hands, who did the math on the salary, just to see how that compares to software engineers today?
I did not, but it sounds like somebody did, Quinn.
It was pretty comparable. I didn't. The inflation calculation is a little hard to work out because you got to factor in cost of living for the Bay Area and so on. But it hasn't changed that much actually. It's a pretty solid offer.
It's not even the $31K a year he's making. It was the 3,000 or 4,000 stock options he was getting. Like that's where the real money would come in. Before all the splits and stuff. So it's the many millions of dollars in stock that would be worth.
Yeah. If you hung on to those, that would certainly be amazing. Not like what was the name of the third founder who sold his stock in for 6 months or something for
and then went and joined the Beatles, but got kicked out of that before they got famous. And, that
right.
guy, poor guy.
Ron something or other.
Ron Wayne, yeah.
Yeah, Wayne. John Wayne's little brother.
He says he's perfectly happy with that and didn't never look back.
I think you would have to tell yourself that at this point. If
Yeah,
I had
maybe
sold
so.
Apple stock for pennies or something in 1981, I would have to tell myself that in order to live with myself, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, totally meant to do it. So.
Yeah, unless you're a Winklevoss or something.
Right.
Yes.
Winklevi.
One of the Winklevi.
One of the Winklevi.
I think the proper Germanic plural would be Winkelvossen.
Okay. I will apologize to them.
And that's why Charles is on the show today.
I mean, come on,
that's why.
Their name's not Winkelvoos, and you don't you don't pluralize Voss.
You don't winkle. Not on this show, mister.
I'm just going to add an edit mark
German
there.
conjugation segment with Charles.
Edit mark there. Put that in the
Quinn and Mike
bloopers. That's definitely.
No, I think Quinn and Mike are privately texting each other like, "What have we done?"
All right, well, we've drifted a little far afield here from Apple II. So to bring us back around, you guys were talking about Wasteland there and how it holds up really well. After we talked to David Trotter last month, I got really into Short Circuit. I fired that up and was playing that. And that's another game that just really holds up incredibly well. That is a fantastic game. Do the rest of you guys have any games or other software that you still fire up and just are pleasantly surprised at how well it holds up and how fun it still is?
AppleWorks, of course. I'm still actually, we've pretty much finished the conversion, but had that client in New York for Jack Friedman for 23 years, maybe 24 years. Anyway, he was using AppleWorks until just very recently, although he didn't play any of the, didn't mess around with any of the fun screensavers or things like that, but he used it to run his business, and I just ported it over to a web-based application that really looks a lot like AppleWorks. So every time I run it, I kind of feel like I'm back in AppleWorks. So
that's amazing. So there's now a web version of AppleWorks in the world? Pretty
much. It does a lot of the same stuff, yeah.
Is that available for someone to go look at, or was it just a one-off for this client?
Yeah, it's very specialized. He's a horologist, watch repairman, Swiss watches, and so everything's very custom for that. But it has a lot of AppleWorks style things like going from multi-record view to single record, and zooming back and forth, and those sorts of things, like in the database. It doesn't do the spreadsheet or word processor. It's the AppWorks database, essentially.
Wow.
Well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. How about the rest of you? Any games or applications that you still fire up?
Lots of games, because my favorite sorts of games, even back in the day, were RPGs and also text adventures. So I love the old CRPGs, Wasteland and Dragon Wars or whatever. So I find they hold up, and I like playing that style. And text adventures hold up because they were just text, and the text is still legible, so it's still awesome. So hooray for everything Infocom did. But then also one of my go-to action games is just as good as the first day I played it was Prince of Persia. That game never gets old and never gets bad, like Lode Runner. Like, they're just perfect games, perfectly executed, and I'll probably continue to play them forever.
Do you play the Infocom games on real hardware or in emulation?
Yep. No, all about real hardware, all about ripping open the real, release the 80s air and play an actual one. I like the feelies, and it's, that whole nostalgic experience. I want to be on the old monitor. I want to have the feelies out. I want to be frustrated as heck, and I want to spend 6 months trying to solve them because that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I don't think you can properly get Babelfish unless you have a good mechanical keyboard typing it with you.
Exactly.
It's just not the same experience on a MacBook with the super slick low profile keys. You have to actually work at it.
Green phosphor helps me think. So I need that.
I still see the. Go ahead, Quinn.
Oh, I was going to say that's interesting because I've been wondering if there's a line with text adventures where people will be more inclined to play it on emulation, because like there's the Infocom collection, on iOS now, so you can play like almost every great Infocom game right on your iPad. And I feel like with text adventures, the experience would translate really well to modern hardware because it is just text. But it's interesting to hear you guys express the exact opposite opinion.
No, because it's so much about having you got to have your map spread out and all your notes and all the feelies, and there's a whole bunch that's required of the game that's outside of the computer that needs to spill over your desk, and like that's, I think, a big part, especially with Infocom anyway. It's a big part of playing the games, I find. So what's on screen is only part of it. The rest of it is the real world stuff that makes it fun. Yeah, it makes it extra fun.
Yeah, the green phosphor and the graph paper, and your pad full of notes where I was in this room and it did this, and then I did this, and now I'm in a twisty maze.
Oh, I'm a twisty maze, and I'm cursing, and here are some new words, and I guess try to map this, they say. So for me, it's that experience.
I don't know if it's sort of always on that it's 2 years out kind of thing. But when I was younger, and I remember playing the games and trying to do the narration in my head, especially with Hitchhiker's Guide, because I had seen the TV adaptation, the BBC TV version, and heard Simon Jones' voice, and that's the narrator that I heard in my head, and I always wanted to have the computer read the descriptions to me in that voice and narrate it and be able to say, "Go north," and then it would say, "You are now in the spaceship Heart of Gold," and have that voice recognition and text to speech pattern back at you. And I'd love to see someone make I guess it's the Z Machine interpreter. Is that what it's called?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's one.
Yeah.
In a really good text to speech engine, and have voice recognition to where I can talk and have it describe the rooms back to me and read out the action and things. Because that would be as immersive as it is in my head. Being able to sort of close my eyes and just talk and listen like listening to an audiobook and have that sort of wash over you. That's the experience that I always wished for when I was playing the games, the text adventure games, because the graphics were in my head and I had to make up the voices and imagine what the character, as they were saying things, what they were, how they would talk, that kind of thing, or how they would, walk from room to room, that sort of stuff.
Well, that experience certainly seems plausible. The voice recognition is certainly good enough these days to do that. So I wonder if someone's done that.
The issue is I also would want Peter Jones, like the original radio guy who was the book, to read it. He's dead, so it'll be a bit of an effort.
Well, they can do what they did.
Technology's not that good yet.
Do what they did with Roger Ebert and basically come up with his phonemes or whatever, and give him a custom voice. I sense a I sense a Hackfest entry. I sense a Kansas Fest Hackfest entry.
Gonna have to up your game next year, Carrington.
Oh yeah. Good luck with that, guys.
It's funny you guys mentioned the note taking and the maps and stuff. I think I had actually forgotten how much of that was the experience. I started playing Space Rogue, the Origin RPG, and it's fantastic game. There's real like 3D space battles, and then you land on space stations, and you can actually walk around in like a kind of an Ultima style. And it's a fantastic game, but there's this really intricate, elaborate storyline with people you have to go talk to and things you have to go find, and everybody's talking to you and giving you all this information, and it's just sort of on you to remember it all. And there's modern games have journals and auto maps and quest logs and achievement lists, and you don't have to write down or remember anything ever. And I think having been playing these modern games for so long, I'd forgotten how much those old games required graph paper and note taking, and how much you were on your own for all that. So
yeah, modern games, you don't even have to play them. You can just come home and see how you did. Well, look at that, I'm doing well.
Exactly. Progress quest. How about you, Mike? I think I left you out on this part. What are you going back to and still playing?
Well, I'm playing Wasteland in 2400 AD.
At the same time.
That's hardcore.
My left hand is playing Wasteland. Am I right? I don't know. I've tried to revisit some of the old Infocom titles, and the puzzles are just so like weird and not related to anything at all, other than you just happen to randomly be able to solve them. That some of those games are very difficult. I actually like
blasphemy.
Yeah, I know. I really like the games that focus less on the puzzles themselves and more on the storytelling. And so I really enjoy Mind Forever Voyaging. I've played that a few times over the years, and it really holds up well. And the other one is Trinity, which is the story. It allows you to play the story of the atom bomb. So I guess if we're talking Infocom, it would be a Mind for Voyaging and Trinity. I also like the Ultima series. I tend to skip, a Calibeth and 1 and 2 because they just weren't very good. But 3 is a great RPG if you're looking for a challenge. Very difficult. They kind of they made the gameplay less difficult, but the story more involved in Ultima 4. If you're looking for a game to go back to and play that's going to take you many, many hours to get through, either one of those is great. Wizardry, I like those titles. Yeah. There's a large amount of games out there that have really held up. And there are some that haven't. So,
well, if you're talking about a game that you can just sit down and play through, it's got to be Karateka or Karateka, however you decide to pronounce it. Mm-hmm. That and Prince of Persia, the kind of really quick action games that you don't have to write stuff down. You don't have to map things on graph paper. Those are the ones where when I'm done testing something, or I'm trying to make sure that this key works on the keyboard now, or that the disk controller that I just yanked out and plugged back in actually works, that's the disk image that I'll go to as Karateka and just say, okay, I'm going to make sure that it works. And then
the problem with testing with something like Prince of Persia or Lode Runner is that would be my afternoon. I would go, well, it's working and I can't stop. Like, those are so addictive. I just immediately would get hooked. Oh, another one is Another World, which I think in the States was called Out of This World. That's another classic, phenomenal, amazing pick up and play game.
I didn't actually know that. There was a version of that on the 8-bits?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually know that. I thought it was like a 16-bit game.
Oh, I think it may have been the 2GS I played that on.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely on the 2GS. In fact, that was Rebecca Heinemann, in fact.
Well, there you go.
Fine, Carrington, Mr. The 2GS isn't a real Apple II, Vanston.
I still like it. It's just not an Apple II.
Mm-hmm.
It's got the gzz in it.
Oh, Mike, I'm so glad you mentioned 2400 AD, because I feel like that's an underappreciated RPG on the 8-bits.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one of my favorites. I like that game so much that I actually made a port of it on the early Macs on there's a version of it that I wrote on my mom's PowerBook 100
Nice.
still
Nice
out there somewhere. Yeah.
And that's what earned Quinn her second cease and desist.
Exactly. Yeah, I have a file of origin cease and desist letters.
Actually, looking at it, I think I've never played 2400 AD, so
Oh, really?
I'm going to add that to my 2 playlist.
It is a great game.
Awesome.
Yeah, the world is very detailed and really well thought out. There's a lot of there's trains and the city has a kind of a life
There's
of its
trains.
own. Yeah, exactly.
Cool. I also haven't played either of the Infocom games that Mike recommended, so I will get around to them eventually. But
Well, I look forward to an unboxing and a playthrough on the 1 Megahertz podcast.
I do actually have both of those boxed too. Yeah, so I should unbox them.
1 megahertz. Oh, that was that podcast that. It doesn't exist anymore, does it?
My main motivation to bring it back is just so that you guys aren't the only Apple II podcast. It's my competitive nature is really the main reason I want to bring it back.
If that were true, you'd have brought it back a long time ago, because Open Apple's still been here this entire time that you have not been doing 1 megahertz. Just saying.
I'm giving you guys a head start. Lulling you. You are
4 years later.
I can't imagine being much more lulled.
Oh, you could be more lulled.
Lulling me to sleep. On that note, I'm going to rein it back in here. So you guys were talking about Infocom. So I was never really like a big text adventure person because I always got just buried in this, infuriating guess the verb game and puzzles that just made no sense. And I never really enjoyed them that much. But, I've been reading the Digital Antiquarian blog, which we've talked about a lot on the show, and he makes these Infocom games sound so great, and so I kind of want to go play them again. So am I missing something here? Did I play the wrong ones, or
You did.
were there games where it really is just like the puzzles are natural and you don't spend all your time fighting the parser? Because that's what I remember.
Yes. Infocom is way better at that than most of them, but there are certain Infocom games that are far better to start with than others, because the more advanced ones are crazily difficult, and if you haven't already sort of immersed yourself in the easier ones, so you get used to it, the more difficult ones are pretty much impossible. But if you start with something like what's the Moon Mist? Moon Mist is usually the one I recommend. That's the first one you should play because it's relatively easy. It's really straightforward. It has multiple endings, so it's fun if you want to take a couple of runs at it. And it can be done in just a couple of settings. It's a relatively straightforward map with no weird, hey, you're in a maze and mapping's not going to work anymore. Nothing like that. So it plays the most fair. The puzzles are most linear. Everything makes sense. The feelings are good, but not crazily necessary for it because it's mostly just letters and stuff. So if you get just view versions on a screen, it's almost as good. So that's usually the one I would recommend people start with.
Okay, it's a good tip. Yeah, I think most people's memories of Infocom is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was sort of
or Zork,
or any of the Zork games.
Yeah. And Hitchhikers is so hard. Like
it's
just
notoriously
bonkers
punishing.
hard.
Yeah.
But strangely, the only Infocom game that I ever actually finished.
Really?
Oh.
Wow. So did you feed the dog? Because that's the thing that gets most people.
After about probably a half dozen incidences of not feeding the dog, yes.
No, what got me was the thing that your aunt gave you that you don't know what it is or whatever. Having to lose that with stuff in it so you can carry it to another. Oh, that like just impossible puzzles.
Well, I say I finish it, but there's an asterisk after that. It was me and probably 2 or 3 of my friends in 3rd or 4th or 5th grade. I can't remember which. Where we basically would play it in the afternoons and then come back to school the next day. Oh, did you do this? Oh, I got to this place and it didn't do that. And then we'd sort of exchange hints and tips. And oh, but you got to do this for Marvin. And then, so yeah, the idea of that any one of us ever could have finished it is misleading. We collaborated. It was an early crowdsourced collaboration, but still my favorite one.
I think that has to have been necessary back then. That sort of working together with people. I mean, before the internet, when had no way to Google solutions, would get stuck on something for months at a time, and that was always where I would just get distracted and go do other things and never come back. So I think if I had someone to play it with, then you maybe could brainstorm the answers to some of these harder puzzles.
Yeah, that game and Bureaucracy and a few others where it's not so much about mapping the maze or oh, this door leads to this, but then I flip a switch and now it does something else, where it's like Myst, where you flip a switch and something happens 20 screens away that you have to go back and find. The ones where you don't have to think about the map so much as the logic. And it's like, what's the weird
bureaucracy is good if you
logic?
don't want to map. Yeah, bureaucracy, you barely move.
Yeah.
It's more just solve where you are and you'll naturally go to another place. So, no, but it's good for that. Like, some people hate the mapping stuff, so bureaucracy is good.
Yeah, and it's
My
about
favorite of them
reading
is
and
Lurking
figuring
Horror.
out the logic and what the situation requires.
Bureaucracy is also really hard, though. Boy, you like the hard ones.
Yeah, I think I was drawn more to the Douglas Adams and the humor.
It was based on his experiences trying to get his address changed at the post office and them insisting that he was dead.
Well, they're right.
Well, now they are. Eventually, the post office is always
They
right.
were playing the long game.
Yeah, and Jimmy Marr's got a great article about bureaucracy on his blog that we'll link to in the show notes. And yeah, I think the upshot of it is that story is probably apocryphal, that Douglas Adams kind of spun this yarn out of a minor inconvenience that he had with a government office of some sort, and he spun it into this elaborate tale of woe, as was his style.
I can't say that I'm surprised at all. By the way, we were talking about like hand mapping and stuff like that, and that's not everyone's game to sit there and draw little squares and connecting lines and trying to keep track of what's in each room and that sort of thing. And if you prefer a computer based solution, there is a program called Trizbort. We talked about it way back when, in the early days of Open Apple, but it's a computer-based mapping solution that's set up specifically to help you map RPGs and text adventures and things like that. And it is Windows only, but you can. I think it runs under Wine and a couple of other things, and it's freeware. So we'll have a link to that in the show notes.
Boo Windows. All right. Well, we're coming up on a nice tidy hour here, possibly more. So let me start gradually wrapping things up here. I think I'm gonna play a card from the. Yeah, that's. Good night, everyone. Click. No, I'm gonna play a card from the hand of Kevin Savitz here. I'm gonna go around the table. Let's see. I'll start with Randy. We've been quiet in the corner there for a while. Is there any closing thoughts or anything that I should have asked the group and didn't about the current state of Apple II and where we're headed and where we've been?
I guess my only comment would be that I was back in San Diego and managed to have lunch with Alan and had the opportunity to see his plastic bucket of Apple II stuff that he had not dug out in about a decade or two, maybe 2 decades. And so it was just a lot of fun to get together with a true legend like Alan, before whom I am a little dust mote, and get to see his wonderful memories and pull out some of his old discs and relive some of those Beagle Brothers times and kind of get him excited again just about thinking a little bit about the Apple II and on all the great memories we had back in San Diego. So that was probably one of my big highlights of 2015 was that time with Alan. And he served me a very nice lunch.
Your stories always have food in them. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, I will work for food.
That's awesome. And yeah, just to reiterate, Antoine, you better show up at Kansas Fest. This is also what peer pressure sounds like.
And bring food.
Yes, bring your set of Olivier's matching set. All right, Charles, how about you? What haven't I asked the group about, or any stories you want to share, or anything like that? Any further products you want to plug? Feel free.
I think everyone is pretty sauced by now. If they've been following along my drinking
It would
game.
have to be.
Yeah, if you've been listening this long. No, I think the biggest looming shadow of Apple II stuff that you have not mentioned in this year-end roundup is 4 a.m.
Ah, yeah.
I don't know if it's if his or her or its emergence came out in
Definitely is.
in specifically 2015, but definitely a big influence on the just the archiving and preservation aspect of the hobby is this mysterious 4 a.m. deprotecting things that have never been preserved before and removing the cracks from things that the original has never been widely seen. Everyone had a hacked version that had no credits or no splash screen, or you couldn't get past level 7, and people just thought that was normal. So I think 4 a.m. is probably the biggest development of 2015 that I think we should definitely mention.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. For anyone who's not on 4AM's Twitter feed, you definitely should be, because it's really fascinating reading. I'm always fascinated. I mean, the software itself is often strange educational things that you've never heard of, conjugating Spanish and such things, but the copy protection on them is always interesting, even though the software is often not. So plus, if you also follow Kevin Savitz, you'll get their hilarious pun train every morning as they talk about the latest crack. So yeah, you're definitely missing out if you're not following all of that. And the preservation aspect, can't be understated. If there's a legacy of DRM, it's that it makes it very difficult to do history. And we're in that window now where these floppies are dying and we're losing our chance to preserve all this software. So even if we don't care about Spanish conjugation lessons, someone in the future will. And so if we don't preserve that stuff now, it's going to be gone forever.
And it's not really so much about like the Spanish conjugation part 3 or the I think the latest one was plant selecting, selecting
Yes.
flowers for your flower garden, as much as the protection schemes themselves are obviously cracking them apart and pulling them apart as he does, and he writes them up with such depth and detail that you're learning about this whole subculture of people that are protecting things and hacking them and then cracking the cracks, and then this sort of cat and mouse game, and also at the same time better understanding how much more there is out there that hasn't even ever come back to the surface. There's all these little programs like, educational stuff that didn't get preserved because it wasn't popular. It wasn't something you download from the BBS. And we don't even know how much we're missing that's out there that could be, some of the first work of someone who's, relatively famous now, or the early work of someone who could have been a great developer if they'd only been discovered, or some strange obsessive protection scheme that has brilliance in it, and the eloquence of the way that it's written, and it, because it worked so well, nobody could ever hack it and it didn't ever get preserved. That kind of stuff is just still hiding out there in these floppies, in these attics and crates and places that they resurface on eBay and in garage sales and whatnot. And there's all these little nuggets that are still out there that we don't even know how much there is.
Yeah, it's very true. And one of 4AM's mantras is that copy protection works. It made all this, especially with educational stuff and productivity stuff, it made this stuff just annoying enough to copy that 99% of people don't bother. And so all these years later, this stuff's still never been cracked. And you can see the history there. A lot of these companies bought their copy protection from, an outsourcer. And so you can kind of see these business relationships behind the scenes by following the archaeological trail of the copy protection. You can see all these small educational companies that all used, the E7, what's it called, bit framing system. And so, that they all bought it from somebody because none of them would have bothered to develop that. So there's history hiding in all this stuff. And I like your point about these sort of undiscovered programmers. I'm often surprised looking 4AM's cracks. He's always got screenshots in there and stuff. And I'm always surprised how good some of that stuff looks. Some of this wacky, small, niche educational software actually has some really great graphics in many cases. So someone put some love into that stuff.
It was a big market back in the day, and they bought, enough for a whole school system as opposed to just one desktop. And so it made sense to put money into it and to protect it, obviously.
Yeah. All right. Well, good addition to the show. Let's see. Carrington, what haven't I asked you that I should have?
Just about, how I'm doing.
Yeah, I didn't ask you that for a reason, because I don't want to know.
For me, I guess the two things we haven't discussed that sort of were big deals for me this year in Apple II is one, how many pieces of Apple II, mostly games, but how many pieces of Apple II software have made their way onto iOS? So I have them with me all the time. I mean, the big one this year was the iOS Silver remake, speaking of the broadband connection stuff, but also there's so many things I now have on my phone that are pick up and play games. Prince of Persia and Calibeth and Pirates and Mystery House and just so many things. And it's just great to walk around with them. So that's been a big difference between recently and a couple years ago.
Broderbund, how dare you? iOS Silver was Beagle Brothers.
Sorry, I meant Beagle Brothers. I was thinking of Broderbund for I think the other thing that I want to talk about, which is a guest you had on Midsummer who blew my mind, which was Lane Nooney.
Yes.
Holy cow.
Awesome.
And I have subsequently followed her stuff and followed her on Twitter, and her research into Mike Broderbund and Sierra Online is just so phenomenal and so just brain exploding. And this whole idea of the effects of the microcomputer revolution, on domestic life and where the furniture goes and those things that were so massive and I never even thought of, and yet I lived through them and had such resonance and effect. It's crazy that I never even noticed. So that was my big brain explosion this year, was Lane Nooney. And I have just sort of enjoyed following her on Twitter and just following this stuff ever since. And so it's just phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was not only the most interesting conversation about printer stands that I've ever had, but also by far my favorite interview of the year that we did. So thank you for mentioning that.
I think it's my favorite Apple II type interview probably ever. Like, I could not believe how good that was and how amazing she is.
Yeah, well, credit Mike for finding that one.
Well, and you can always tell when she's flown back out to have another round of face-to-face talks with the Sierra Online folks, because she starts posting these really great photos of internal documentation, and because she's so effusive and enthusiastic about it, it's a wonderful experience following her on Twitter. And if you're not, you're really missing out.
Yep.
Yeah, and the behind the scenes photos of that soft porn photo shoot are just amazing.
Yeah. The one thing that we didn't talk about that I think, one of the things that we didn't talk about that I think we should at least mention was that, Opus 2 is now reliably available again, thanks to our previous podcast host, Ken Gagney, over at juiced.gs, and which I think is under his Gamebits corporate umbrella of domination. So you can buy those and download them now from Ken. And thanks to Ken and Mike Westerfield for getting their heads together and making that happen.
Excellent. Yeah, and that reminds me, another connection there, JuiceGS and 4AM. They're doing an interview in JuiceGS with 4AM, and it's kind of a community-sourced one. So there's a bunch of different people in the community who are asking different questions. So it should be a really good read.
I did want to say boo 4AM, and because they have deigned not to appear on our podcast, and therefore boo I say, and I will continue to say it until 4AM comes and does an interview with us.
Yeah, we offered shadowy lighting and stuff.
We did.
maybe my text to speech engine would work for that. He can type it all into,
there you go.
I'm going to go ahead and reveal my personal theory about 4AM. I know I've said before that I thought maybe it was a whole Dread Pirate Roberts sort of thing, where he passes the hat on to someone else. But my
it's
current,
like 10 different people.
Yes, it is, with one very cohesive writing style. I personally think now, I've done the research, I've looked into it. I think he's a Terminator sent from the future.
Mm-hmm.
He's running
Makes
an
sense.
advanced Skynet operating system on a massively parallel 6502 hardware platform.
65CO2.
Oh, 65CO2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course. I mean,
well, I'm sure they had to have upgraded it at some point. But yeah, he was
it's all
sent
about
back,
that STZ instruction. You really need that.
back in time to learn the secrets of assembly from the master hackers of the 80s, and having learned their tricks, he's now systematically removing them and their copy protection schemes from the historic record, so that Skynet can emerge, and no one will know how to protect themselves from the creeping tendrils of Skynet and its 6502 based distributed operating system.
May I just add that the phrase "learn the secrets of assembly from the master hackers of the '80s"? I need to watch that movie.
And I will say that logic is flawless, and I wish to subscribe to your newsletter.
On a slightly more serious note, I know that I'm going to go ahead and say it, boo Atari, boo Commodore, but is there someone or someones like that that's doing the same sort of effort for Commodore or Atari or other operating systems that maybe don't have as Apple-centric a bent?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have heard people in other communities bemoan the lack of a 4AM, but I do also think that they probably have a slightly less of an issue in this area because the educational software market, for example, was so big on the Apple II, and the productivity software market was so big that there's so much of that software that wasn't cracked. Whereas, like the Commodore 64, let's be honest, the market's probably 98% games, and those all got cracked. So I think they probably have a little less of a preservation challenge. But that might just be my Apple II myopia speaking as well. So if we have
and the hardware was different. Part of the issue was that the disk controller was so dependent on the CPU, and you could do so many tricks with it that the protection schemes could fiddle with the disk in ways that other hardware and operating systems couldn't. So it may just be that part of that is that once the drive itself was better understood, the crackers can just go ahead and deprotect anything, whereas there was so much done at the software level that you need a 4AM, you need the disassembly genie to pull the bits apart and understand all the nibbles.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Every platform had copy protection, but the Apple II, it was a whole different world. Considering what fine-grained control you had of the drive with the CPU, you could just do crazy magic tricks that, like the E7, bit framing trick we've talked about, and spiral tracking and half track and quarter tracking and adding sectors and doing all sorts of other craziness that just, when you have total control of the drive, it becomes this elaborate cat and mouse game that I don't think the other platforms had nearly as much of.
Well, I, for one, am looking forward to the JuiceGS interview.
Should be a good read. Indeed.
One thing that I think we almost forgot to mention that was important this year was the release of the GS OS updates to 602 and 603. Have any of you guys had a chance to play with those?
My GS is still in a box in my mom's basement, so no.
Carrington, have you?
My TGS is in a box in Quinn's mom's basement. Quinn's mom is taking everybody's GS. Quinn's mom is really mean. She's
don't believe
away from
in
this.
the 2GS anyway. So
yeah, 2GS, whatever.
It's
That's
8 more
weird,
it's
but
8 more
also
bits than he
convenient.
needs.
Yeah. Then he knows what to do with. There's a difference.
Randy, you're a big 2GS fan. Have you seen these updates?
As soon as I get back to Canada this summer, I'm going to try to get my 2GS out of that basement.
Man,
it's
Nobody really gonna have to talk to my mom.
It's an epidemic, man. It has gone way too far, Quinn. Way too far. This has to stop now.
How does she know all of you?
2016 is going to be the year the 2GSs are liberated. Free the basement computers.
We have to hold Canada Fest, and all of us just converge on the Donkey House.
That's right. C Fest instead of K Fest. I have not run into that, Mike. So I'd be curious, but have not actually had any experience with that as of yet.
Okay. Well, then I guess it wasn't that significant.
Yeah, not to understate, it is really cool that the fan community picked up an official Apple product 25 years after the fact and fixed it and have started adding to it. That's really cool. So take that, Commodore.
And didn't get cease and desisted out of existence.
Exactly. Yeah. We're still flying under the radar with some of this stuff. Hopefully it'll stay that way. I guess that's one advantage to the Commodore community. Their company doesn't exist anymore, so they don't have to worry about annoying anybody.
I'm just still trying to figure out how can you have a podcast if you want to fly under the radar.
Yeah, well, They don't seem to bother us too much here. Although we did try to make T-shirts, and they got rejected by so far 2 of those online T-shirt companies because they auto-detect the Apple logo that's buried inside the Open Apple logo, and so they reject it for copyright violations. So people have asked for Open Apple T-shirts, and we're struggling to find a way to make them because all these services will reject it. So that's a work
your
in progress.
podcast at least is listed on the iTunes podcast listing with that logo on it. I submitted my my podcast with what's essentially a photoshopped image of an Apple II badge, and they rejected it immediately because it contained
Really?
the Apple logo.
Wow.
Huh.
I think so. It was rejected so quickly that I think there was an algorithm involved.
Probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I guess
Maybe they
it
thought you were
was-
too close to Open Apple. They're like,
That's
no.
right. That's right.
They're protecting
Yeah, it was
us.
actually us. Yeah, we wrote the C&D. Actually, that was me. I just changed the names on the origin ones and forwarded them to you.
To Charles.
Yeah, it's possible that the Apple in our logo it's small and kind of at a weird angle and kind of in the corner, so maybe it sneaks through some of their algorithm. Although we did try to update it a while back. We tried to add the colored stripes to it, and it never did show up in my feed with the updated logo. I don't know if Mike, you've seen the updated one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It just doesn't like you.
Yeah, a few people do.
And yet still
Don't
we
all jump in
podcast
at once to to correct me on that.
Oh, don't worry. We won't.
Well, on that note, I guess we know why I'm the one who gets the hate mail. On that sunny note, I think we'll wrap it up here. Thank you all for being with us tonight. This has been an amazing 2015 for the Apple II and for the Apple II community, and an awesome year for Open Apple Podcast. So on that note, I think we'll bid you all adieu, and happy holidays, and happy New Year.
This has been the Open Apple Podcast. Subscribe to us in iTunes or visit us at open-apple.net, where you can browse our extensive catalogue of past episodes or read our blog. If you like what you've heard today, or even if you didn't, your comments, questions or ideas are always welcome. Send them to feedback@open-apple.net.
I'm hearing major mic banging. Is that at my end?
A major what?
No. Sorry, Mike. Mic thumping.
That doesn't sound any better.
I'm hearing something to do with Mike, and it's bugging me.